German Olympic team is a ghostly sprawl. In the west of Germany, after World War II, the past was quickly swept away. All the putrescent ruins of war were removed to make way for shopping centers and homes with geranium-filled window boxes. But the east of Germany is another land. Its communist rulers could not afford to neuter history with new construction. German pain lies closer to the surface. Before Germany was unified in 1990, the men worked in nearby uranium mines for the Soviets. The women worked for a textile plant. But both industries collapsed soon after unification, leaving a pall of gloom that the promise of capitalism has scarcely lifted. The older people here lived under a dictatorship from Hitler in 1933 to the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. The compliant habits of mind of more than a half-century are not easily overcome. For the old women, the story of Berga is principally about work, its presence or absence. There used to be jobs when the textile factory was in private hands and more than 1,000 people worked there. The business belonged to a family named Englander, Jews, the women note, who disappeared around the time of World War II. An unhappy thing, the war, but say what you like, one woman remarks, Hitler put people to work. At first, Hitler's war consisted principally of the inebriation of victory, but then came the slow encroachment of defeat. It was in the final spasm of Nazi rule that the war visited Berga in a particular way. The first indication of unusual stirrings came in the summer of 1944, with the arrival of SS administrative staff led by Lieutenant Willy Hack. Engineers, mining experts, and land surveyors came to Berga too, inspecting the hills on the far side of the Elster for their potential to conceal a production facility in an underground complex of tunnels and chambers. Such activity had been unknown in the town before then. Naturally, it aroused curiosity. But asking questions, the old women sigh, was dangerous. The notorious Buchenwald camp was less than 60 miles away, and ending up there was easy enough. Still, in so intimate a town, it was impossible to overlook the construction of a concentration camp. The first prisoners arrived in Berga on November 12, 1944. Pitiful, emaciated creatures in striped pajama-like uniforms, their faces hollow, eyes haunted, movements halting. The women learned that most of them were Jews from Buchenwald. The appearance of these frail figures was shocking. In the vast complex of Nazi death camps, Berga amounted to a detail. It was dwarfed by Buchenwald. After the war, Berga was subsumed into the Soviet part of Germany, and nobody asked too many questions about its ephemeral little hell. But the camp lived on in these old women's minds, a discomforting memory shoved aside, awakened only occasionally, perhaps by a wartime photograph. A memory, as these women like to describe it now, of helplessness. The prisoners were behind barbed wire or cordoned off by guards and dogs as they marched. It was impossible to help them. Some local women, like Marie Scheffel, would spill buckets of oats as the prisoners passed. But that sort of impetuous gesture could get you in trouble. The explosions punctuated the night as the tunnels were mined. Hundreds of prisoners died. The dead could be seen as they were trundled through town on wheelbarrows, half covered with pieces of cloth, a frail limb, already stiff, protruding here or there. Better not to look too closely. Most of the corpses were dumped in a mass grave, a place still known as the Jewish cemetery. The old women do not know if all the dead were Jews. The place simply took that name. But when asked, they say they know that American GIs were among the imprisoned at Berga and among those who died. In fact, Berga's little secret is that it was perhaps the most intense killing field for American prisoners in Europe. To this little town, Jewish soldiers, POWs deemed to resemble Jews, so-called troublemakers, and GIs picked at random, were sent by the Nazis after their capture. Arriving on February 13, 1945, 3 months after that first trainload of prisoners from Buchenwald, many of these Americans, too, were worked to death in the last months of World War II. The Americans were appalled by the concentration camp prisoners they saw. But the GIs quickly learned the inexorable arithmetic of Nazi destruction. When day after day the outlay of energy exceeds that consumed, the body wastes away. In the end, survival comes down to calories. Calories and, in some measure, the mysteries of the mind. So it was that as virtually nowhere else in Europe, the fate of captured American GIs and persecuted European Jewry intersected, briefly joined in a dance of death. Here, as nowhere else, American Jews understood the fate of European Jews under Hitler. To almost all Americans, the Holocaust was an idea that only coalesced after 1945. But to this group of 350 American soldiers, the crime was an immediate, agonizing reality, even if they could not initially grasp its scope. More than 20% would die in a little over 2 months. These soldiers did not know they were part of a last-ditch Nazi effort to offset relentless Allied bombing of German fuel facilities by building underground fuel production centers. Hitler ordered thousands of concentration camp prisoners to be used in pursuit of this fantastical plan, and gave the SS the central role in the selection of prisoners and the organization of construction. A problem was that by late 1944, concentration camp prisoners were in such a pitiful state that they could scarcely work. The vast Nazi death factory in Poland had largely shut down by this time. Soviet troops reached Auschwitz on January 27, 1945. The result was that, with the Polish killing centers gone, former Auschwitz prisoners were dumped into concentration camps in the Reich. Often they survived death marches to get there. Their skeletal state helps explain why the SS turned to American GIs for work in the Berga tunnels. Because speed was of the essence, Lieutenant Hack, the SS commander, was impatient with the European Jewish prisoners sent from Buchenwald. So incapable of productive effort, Hack sent many of them back to Buchenwald and demanded replacements. Before doing so, according to one witness at his post-war trial, Hack would sometimes amuse himself by setting his dog on the prisoners, or beating and kicking them. It was in the same spirit that he greeted the Americans who arrived soon afterward, prisoners of war destined to become his slaves. Private Edward Goranak, from Port Huron, Michigan, was part of the pandemonium in the tunnels. He had been captured at the Battle of the Bulge and arrived at Berga on February 13, 1945, a young man of 32, in reasonably robust health. By March 22nd, just over a month later, he was dead. Until March 19th, Goranak kept a diary that captures the Americans' gradual descent into an abyss at Berga they could not at first comprehend. Like the whole group of 350 GIs, Goranak had first been held at the Stalag 9B prisoner of war camp at Bad Orb, near Frankfurt. He himself was not Jewish and had no idea why he was selected for transport to Berga, but he quickly perceived that, hard as conditions at Bad Orb were, this new camp represented another level of horror, one exactly equivalent to that being endured by the European Jews and political prisoners. This entry in his diary reflects the shocked realization of one American soldier that he has become part of a process without a name, that later became known as the Holocaust. February 16, 1945. Started to work digging a tunnel. The dust is bad. We work 8 hours, 6 till 2. We have no dinners and only a cup of coffee and what bread we can save from supper, which isn't much. February 17th. Worked in same tunnel. The fellows are too weak even to walk out there. February 19th. I had cup of tea and about 1½ slices bread, on which I have to work until 2 p.m. Seen Jerry officer hit Jew with a stick. February 21st. They treat us as slaves. We are even on slave rations like European Jews and political prisoners. February 22nd. The bosses are beating hell out of our GIs. Couple bad cases of pneumonia. February 23rd. Have a terrible cold. The fellows are getting weaker.